Hi, welcome to You Didn't Get the Memo. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray, and as always, we have a fantastic show for you today. We are going to be talking with educator Demetrius Ball, and I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in. I'm Gloria Bailey Ray, your host. And for those of you who are watching the show, I always like to remind you that You Didn't Get the Memo is about providing you, the viewer, with relevant, factual, mainstream information to help you be informed and to make informed decisions. If you have a comment or a question, you can place it in the comment section in the box to your right, and we'll do our very best to get to you, respond back to you. But before we even get started, let me just give a shout out to my newest viewers who are in Austin, Dallas, Killeen, Mississippi, Chicago, and Oregon. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to You Didn't Get the Memo. I appreciate you. I have much love for you. As I said, today we're going to be talking with Mr. Demetrius Ball, who is an educator. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Ball. First of all, he's a dynamic leader that's focused on serving his family and community. As a current middle school principal, he is committed to creating a climate and school culture that is welcoming and inclusive for all students and staff members, and sees a strong relationship as the key to helping students and staff thrive. Now, we're going to come back and circle back around a little later on and ask him how does he do that. But Demetrius is motivated by the idea that our destinies are linked, and he knows that his success depends on the success of everyone else. He's constantly developing his knowledge and skills through connections and reflection, becoming a connected educator through a variety of social media platforms. This has transformed his knowledge base and has taken his leadership to a higher level. Because of these connections, he's grown into a blogger, a book author, and podcaster. He's presented at local, regional, and national conferences on topics such as technology, integration, podcasting, and the power of developing your professional, personal learning community, restorative justice, and culturally responsive teaching. As you can see, Mr. Demetrius Ball has been very busy. But here's the thing that I also want you guys to know, that he's a graduate of the United States Military, West Point, New York, where his leadership journey really and truly began. After graduation, he served 5 years as a field artillery officer in the Army, completing 2 tours in the Middle East. So, I want to welcome Mr. Demetrius Ball to the show. Thank you so much for joining me, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Miss Gloria. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, let's get started with this. My first question, as I was introducing you, one of the things that you talked about was that you believe in a welcoming and inclusive for all students and staff member, and you see strong relationships as the key to helping students and staff thrive. So my question to you is, how do you do this? How do you incorporate this into what it is that we're talking about?
Absolutely. I think that relationships are the most important thing when it comes to building a strong community and building a strong culture. And I think that that begins with having a leader that is clear in their focus, their commitment to the organization. As a school leader, our focus is on moving students, helping them prepare academically, socially, emotionally. And so I spend a lot of time being out front in my school, physically and figuratively, just having conversations, sharing the challenges that I face as a leader, just life in general, and sharing those things. And I think when you're transparent about who you are as a person and the things that you face that are challenging to you, folks begin to trust you. I think when I joined my school, and really in every leadership position I've had, I've always said, I'm not the subject matter expert on every single thing. I don't know every single thing, but I'm going to rely on you, my staff, my teachers, to help me grow in different areas, and we're going to do this thing together. And staying committed and staying true to that is one way that you build community. Again, actually being out front, asking questions of your students, of your staff, of your parents, to get their input on how we do things. Again, as the school leader, I set the vision, but I'm not the only one that has to carry out a vision and the mission of our school. So I believe that involving all of the folks in our community is really important to building that space that's safe for them, that is welcoming for them, so that we can move our organization and we can move our students in the right direction.
Right. So, with that, you talked about becoming a connected educator. So, part of what you're saying, you also mentioned that as a connected educator, is transform your knowledge base and taking your leadership to higher levels. So, can you expound a little bit on how that has also helped you in your leadership roles?
Sure. And when for those of you that aren't familiar, I'm using the term connected as far as being on social media and being active, and using the tools like Twitter and Instagram and StreamYard, like we're on right now, using tools like that to not just be connected to my local community, but the educator community as a whole. I would say back in 2014, I was going through my administrative certification, and I think we're going to touch on that a little bit later. But one of the things that we had to do was to join a professional organization. And so I joined the National Association for Secondary School Principals, and I went to their national conference in Dallas in 2014. And one of the stations that you have that you can go to and talk to folks and learn about what they do and all those different things. One of the principals that was leading the session was talking about social media and Twitter specifically. And she grabbed my smartphone and she said, "You're not on Twitter. We got to get you on." So I got an account for Twitter, because at the time I was like, Twitter is just for teenagers, or a place to be social and get caught up on the gossip of celebrities. And she was like, "No, this is a powerful tool that educators need to be involved in." And so I got my account, I logged in, and she's like, "All right, these are the top 5 people that you need to follow. Follow all the people here at the conference that you see and hear them speak, and then start following the different folks that they're following." And really, that's how I became connected. And I went from a leader that I was at the time I was a high school social studies teacher, and I went to basically I was in my little silo, if you will. But when I was exposed to all the different things that teachers that I was connecting with were doing, the different tools they were using, the different strategies. Now, don't get me wrong, when I was at my school site and in my district at the time, we had a lot of tools at our disposal and we were doing a lot of good things. But when I was seeing what folks were doing all across the country and all across the world, it just opened me up to, wow, I need to start trying a lot of different things.
Right,
And it made me grow a lot and push myself and challenge myself. And so
right.
that's what I mean by being
Being
connected and
connected.
helping.
Yeah,
Hmm.
thank you for expounding on that. One of the things, for those who are just tuning in, our topic today is, are our children being left behind? But the reason why I want to set the background and the tone for why Demetrius and what you have done is because these things that you're talking about right now, because it's almost like when COVID-19 happened, I think that exposed a lot of things with people. One, just what you said, people who aren't connected, not accustomed to using social media, because, yeah, there's a social media gossip piece, but then there's also the social media help piece, the social media information piece that people need to know about. But let me circle back around, because one of the things that we didn't talk about and wasn't in the bio is the fact that you have also served as, in a role as a high school assistant principal. You have kind of just moved around. So from teacher to principal to assistant principal to principal now. You're principal now at a middle school. Is that correct? Or I
Yes,
think it's a
yes,
middle
ma'am.
school.
Hmm.
Okay, so with that, there comes a lot of training and ongoing training, I would say, in education. And I was intrigued when you were referred to me because I'm watching you as an author. You know, you're blogging, podcasting, and and you right now you just seem to just be just really calm. But I'm like watching you, and I'm like, this brother can go. So you're very knowledgeable as it relates to all of these different things. And I think your knowledge and understanding of all of the social media pieces will play and probably has played a huge role even in your leadership with your staff members. Would that be a correct assumption or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that technology piece that I've
Mm-hmm,
always been interested in
mm-hmm,
has done a huge thing. I mean, you talk about just some of my past experiences that you mentioned. Um, I'm part of a current podcast. We're going through a transition right now, but the AOS podcast that I'm a part of, it's three Black male administrators
mm-hmm.
leading schools, and we're offering free PD. But all that came out of really being connected and just trying different things. I'm really into my professional development, my personal development, and just by putting yourself out there, so many different opportunities come. Just being willing to try things. Uh, this opportunity to join you today, I think, is sprung out of just my experience and being willing to get involved and connect and understand and try to understand a lot of the different technical aspects of what goes on in technology, because I mean, technology is the present.
Right.
Right now we're doing school remotely, and I think my background in my comfort level with using different technologies has helped me lead my school and help my get my teachers comfortable with it as
Right.
well.
Right. That's one thing I was really wanting us to delve into, but we've already kind of touched on several things. So I'm going to circle back around to, first of all, let's just start with your a little bit more about your backstory because you graduated from West Point, and that in itself is no easy feat. Anybody that knows anything about West Point, it says an awful lot. But as a result of that, what I was really hoping is that we would have someone else on because we want to talk about the steps that it takes to become an educator. It's just not like you just show up and just say, I want to be a teacher, and there's nothing behind that. So, talk a little bit about what that backstory is and what really and truly inspired you to teach.
Sure. So I grew up in Ohio from elementary through into middle school. I lived in Columbus, and then I moved to a small town in Northwest Ohio called Findlay. And there I was one of very few Black students. When I got to my first school in sixth grade, I was the only Black student there. And then in seventh grade, there were, four or five of us. And it was, mostly white, and it was kind of a culture shock for me. But I would say what helped me in that transition was my teachers, my athletics coaches, and my principal. I had the same principal from seventh through 12th grade. When we transitioned from middle school to high school, she came up to the high school with us. And honestly, she was like my mom, and she was a huge mentor and role model for me. And I want to say somewhere between 10th and 11th grade, I decided that I wanted to get into education, and she was my role model again, and she's currently one of my mentors, Dr. Crates, that really encouraged me when I mentioned that education was something I was interested in. She encouraged me, and when I eventually became an educator, she was pushing me. you need to look at administration, you need to start working on your PhD, and all those different type of encouraging things. But that time that I spent with her, I really felt like, you know what, I want to go to school. I wanted to go to Ohio State, become a teacher, and then go back to Finley and take her spot as the high school principal. But as you mentioned, I had the opportunity to go to West Point, and when I started to learn about the academy, I was like, you know what, this is something that I think I can do. I really want to try. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized that this is an opportunity that you don't pass up when you have it. So I was really blessed to go through that process and be exposed and have the
Mhm.
opportunity. So
Yeah.
I decided that's what I was going to do, and committed to 4 years at school, and then 5 years on active duty. And when I decided to get out, I actually started working my master's degree in secondary education, and uh, just about finished that when it was time for me to leave the Army. And when I got out, all I had to do was my student teaching in order for me to finish my certification. So I did alternative certification for teaching, but most universities have teaching programs. If you decide that you want to become a teacher after you've already graduated with your bachelor's, a lot of schools have 1 year accelerated programs where you get your teacher certification, both in person and online.
Mhm.
So, so that's how I went to school, all online, and then got out, did my student teaching, and again, it was a huge blessing because where I did my student teaching in the spring, I ended up getting hired over the summer as my first social studies teaching position. So everything, really, really worked out for me in that part.
Good, good. Well, look, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about you've actually taught at various schools, but I really want us to delve into what is the missing link between children that are successful and those that are not. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
All right, if you are just joining us, you're tuned in to You Didn't Get the Memo with me. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray, and my guest today is Mr. Demetrius Ball. Before we went to break, one of the things that I posed to my guest, Mr. Demetrius, was what is the missing link between children that are successful and those that are not? So, Demetrius, what are your thoughts on that particular question?
I think one of the biggest indicators of student success is the belief that teachers have in them, the belief that educators have in them. And that is significant when it comes to student success. I would say if you have a teacher that comes to school every single day and truly loves their kids and really cares about their success, then they're going to make progress no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the situation. Because again, as I talked about at the beginning, that community, that sense of belonging, that sense of a place that school is a safe place for me is goes a long way for students to be successful. You have to have teachers that understand who their students are. Well, first of all, you have to have teachers that understand themselves, because when it comes to educating Black and Brown students, most of the educators that we have are usually white women that are in classrooms. And when we talk about Black and Brown students specifically, there's a disconnect culturally a lot of times, and teachers can come into, and it's any teacher, it's not just white women that are teachers, it's the Black men, anyone comes into a situation with their biases and with their preconceived notions of what a student is capable of doing. Well, when you come into a situation and you truly feel and show that you love your students and that you want them to be successful, you're going to do what's necessary to make it happen for them. That's knowing how to teach students. That's knowing your pedagogy. That's knowing your content standards. That's making sure that you're spiraling curriculum, and that means, when I'm assessing students on one skill, on one test or quiz or whatever the case is, that we continue to come back to those skills and they continue to build on themselves. Being able to do that, being able to manage your class and being focused on developing professionally
Hmm.
makes a huge difference. So teachers have a huge role in that. You've got different circumstances, whether it's socioeconomic status, whether it's parent involvement, all those things are a component. But students are spending 7 hours in a school, and they have contact with one to five or six or seven teachers each day, and that investment, that love, that passion that those teachers show is a huge indication. And I think it's also part of our responsibility to engage families and make them a part of their students' education, because they're the experts. They're the
Yeah.
experts on their students. And if we don't include them, then we're going to have gaps, and we're going to have gaps in the opportunities. We're going to have gaps in
Mm.
what we're providing to students.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear you say that a lot of the teachers in the classroom are white female teachers. And one of the things that comes up for me is I I think this is my personal opinion that sometimes, our children of color are looked at with different lenses, and a lot of times there's that preconceived notion that they won't get it, they can't get it. And my question to you is, let's think about this for a moment. Why are there not more black male and female teachers, but definitely black male teachers in this particular industry? Because I think that that also, as a role model, does something for children of color. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think representation definitely matters. I know that personally, when I decided that I was going to be an educator, I felt like I wanted to be the educator that I didn't necessarily see. I definitely had educators that believed in me because they told me. And so that's a huge component of it. And I had, in my K-12 experience, I had two Black educators, one Black woman, one Black man, and that was in fourth grade and in sixth grade. Other than that, I saw very few uh, Black educators in the school buildings. Now, I grew up in a family where we have educators. My stepmom is an educator. I have a great aunt that was an educator. My dad is now a college professor. But education is something that is very huge, and it's important to my family and important to my growth. And so I think uh, that experience that Black males specifically have in school is one reason why we don't see a lot, because again, we go back to that cultural difference. When you have a white teacher or any teacher that's teaching you that doesn't necessarily have the same experience, and not all Black men have the same exact experience as the students that they
Right,
teach.
right.
But uh, but I think when there's that disconnect, when they can't necessarily relate to those
Mhm,
experiences,
mhm.
um, that doesn't create an environment where students feel safe. And if I go to school every day, I don't feel valued, I don't see folks that look like me or that talk like me or have the same expressions as me, or can get to my level and connect with me, then I'm not going to be necessarily one that wants to go into that field. I think that a lot of students, whether they're Black or Latino or whatever the case is, whatever the category you want to call them, they want to see that connection between what they're learning in school and what's going to translate to them making money in the real world. And if we can't bring that, or at least find what they're passionate about, they're not going to want to
Mhm.
continue to be in a K-12 system. And then I also think, I think we can go back. I was doing some reading on this about increasing in the Black male teaching population. And I want to give props to one of my mentors, Sharif Al-Mekki. You can look him up, but he's the CEO, runs the um, Center for uh, Black Educators. I think I'm getting the name wrong, but we can look that up and get that information to you. But there's folks that understand that there's a lack of Black male educators. You look at some of the stats, and it's like 2% of educators are Black men. So we need more. And you go back in history, I think one of the unintended consequences of Brown versus Board of Education was the breakdown of that pipeline for Black educators.
Absolutely.
And when you go to integration, I mean, first of all, the educators, Black educators in the South in the 40s and 50s and 30s, they worked hard to get equal access to education for their Black students, whether it was facilities, whether it was transportation. You look at the book, The Lost Education of Horace Tate, and he goes through that experience and all the things that those Black teachers did to get their students what they needed. They ended up sacrificing their jobs because once Brown passes and districts start to integrate, they're going to bring Black students into these formerly all white schools. They're going to bring the students, but they're not bringing the teachers. They're not bringing the principals. And so
Right.
they ended up sacrificing their careers, even though at the time, Black educators were probably much more educated and prepared than the white teachers were in the schools that they were going to.
Look, I can speak on that because I was in segregated schools up until sixth grade, and when they started integration. So I can truly say that the education that I got from the Black teachers was nothing at all that I got from my white teachers. Not saying that they weren't competent, but it was something about being able to make that connection, having someone that knew and understood the type of upbringing, the type of household that showed a very, very deep interest in your success. And it just went a long way when one of those teachers would say, I'm so proud of you. You've done a great job. And to this day, I can remember all of those teachers that I had in elementary school. But going through junior high and high school, I think if I may even be able to recall two. And I think that that says a whole lot. And that leads me into the question about how teaching has changed over the years. And you touched a lot on that. But my question is, do you think teachers are more engaged or less engaged? Because the rumor out there that I have heard is that a lot of the young white teachers come into the Black schools in inner city, they cut their teeth on basically they learn the ins and outs, and from there they move on to other jobs that are much more palatable. So what do you say in regards to that?
Yeah, I would say that there I think in a lot of different situations that we see in education, some teachers feel like when they go into a school that is mostly black and brown students,
Hmm.
that they have that they have a responsibility as saviors. Like they're going into
Hmm.
these kids, they need help, they
Right.
need me, and I'm going to be the one to help fix them. And when you go into a situation with that mindset, as opposed to, I'm here to help, I'm here to support, I'm here to figure out how to best help you grow,
Right.
get those foundations, get those reading skills, get those writing
Hmm.
skills, get those
Hmm.
math skills. Um, I don't need to save you. You got all the potential in the world.
Right.
It's just a matter of figuring out the best way in our system
Hmm.
to get you to the point where you're going to grow and get the most out of our education system.
Yeah.
And Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just think that it's very important that you don't paint every child with the same brush. Don't make assumptions about something that you don't know about, because that seems to also happen. And I can just say that with my grandchildren, the difference of how one teacher that is non-black treats them as opposed to a teacher that is of color, black, Hispanic, Latina. So it's very, very different. And I think that teachers, educators everywhere need to understand you can't paint everybody with the same brush, because just because someone may be raised in the ghetto or the hood, as they call it, doesn't mean that they don't have a household where the structure is education is key and it is important. So those are just some of the things that, yeah, I think that is really important. And when I think about if our children are being left behind, maybe it could be that there is that misperception about our children of color, and it is the farthest thing from the truth. But look, we're going to just pause for the cause. We'll be right back. And when we come back, one question that I have for you is what can or what is being done to engage and keep students focused on education?
Myth. If you get COVID 19, you'll recover after a few days. That myth is false. We're only just beginning to understand the effects of COVID 19 on the human body, as we're starting to see more and more people identifying as long haulers who are having symptoms for weeks, if not months, after their initial infection. Continue to wear a mask, socially distance, and wash your hands. Together, we can keep COVID out of school.
For ways to keep your community safe, go to backtoschooltogether.com.
Hey, if you're just tuning in, I am talking with my guest, Mr. Demetrius Ball, who is an educator. He is a principal at a middle school, but he has the experience of being a principal at high school. He's a West Point graduate and has definitely paid his dues in service to our country. Before we went to break, one of the things that I asked Demetrius was what can or what is being done to engage and keep students focused on getting educated. And in particular, because if you look at the stats and you look at the numbers that are being reported, Black students, Hispanic students still fall below the norm if you look at those that are graduating and those who are not. So what really and truly is being done to keep our students of color focused on being educated and moving to that next level in their educational path?
I think, as I mentioned before, it's really important that we can show students the value of education, the opportunities that come. One of the things that I feel is my responsibility as an educator, as a Black male educator, is to set a standard for the students that I interact with, the students at my school, the students in my community, and just model for them, when you and have conversations and just expose them to what the opportunities that are in existence for them, no matter what the case is. And I think that's part of our job as educators as a whole, to expose our students to these different opportunities. Um, show them what they can do with math education, show them what they can do with reading, bring in folks from outside of education, industry, private sectors, figure out what they're interested in, and bring those people in to help them tell the stories. Because one of the things that I found when I was in high school and I was teaching a leadership class, I started to bring in folks from the community. And I had a school board member who actually dropped out of high school. I had a veteran that came in and talked about his experiences about, barely graduating from school. And there's this misconception that you have to do things in these specific steps in order to be successful. But you're the
Yes.
one that determines what success looks like,
Mhm.
and helping them understand what those opportunities and what those stories are, that makes them real. Like, there's kids that don't think that they can own a business, but
Yes.
if we can bring
Yes.
somebody in to show them, hey, you need to take these steps X, Y, and Z. They're like, okay, and they say, hey, while I'm showing you these steps, getting this education is really important because you're getting the fundamentals of
Mhm.
what needs to happen in your in that particular sector. And so
Right.
just exposing students to the different opportunities. I think that so many get caught up in this cookie cutter pattern of what
Right.
school has to look like and what
Mhm.
success has to look like. But
Right.
it can take all
And
sorts of
and it also has to do with maturity. A lot of times certain students just aren't at that level where maybe the instructor thinks that they should be. They're still teenagers, right? But that brings up a great question that I love to get your take on is it has to do with do you think schools should offer more vocational and elective classes or stick to a focus strictly on college bound curriculum, regardless of the student's focus? Because that's something I came up with. And there were a lot of vocational classes, whether it was automotive, it was woodworking, it was electrical. There are a number of things because I always say we're all going to need all these people. We're going to need plumbers and electricians and mechanics and those kinds of things. But that seemed to have been just phased out. It's just this curriculum of education or book learning. And so, what are your thoughts around that? Should there be more vocational classes that are intertwined in a school's curriculum?
I think so, because I think that opens up. I mean, I'm a huge supporter of the arts, and it's really difficult as a school leader
Mhm.
because the focus right now is on the math, is on the science, it's on that reading, and all of those are foundation. I mean, we got to graduate kids that can read. If they can't read, then we've been a failure to that student into our community. If they don't have those foundational math skills, that's a tragedy as well. But when you expose them to the arts, when you expose them to um, the automotive classes, when you expose them to the wood shop, when you expose them to computers, and all the STEM fields, when drama, uh, 3D art, 2D art, cooking, culinary arts, horticulture, when you expose them to all those different things,
Yes,
they're so much more primed to learn in those core classes, if you will,
yes,
just because they find that spark. Because there are students that, being able to write a 5 paragraph essay just isn't their thing, but you
exactly.
expose them to a canvas, you expose them to a hammer and nails, because just like you said, we need those jobs.
Yeah,
Not everyone is going to go to college, and that's just a reality. But I think part of our education system is to prepare students for that because there are so
mhm,
many opportunities that come with that.
I agree.
And I think that we get funded. Our funding is so limited, but we're asked to do so many things in
Mhm.
education. If we were to get that funding to support more vocational opportunities, I think that would be great for our students. And those students, and even those students that aren't going to go into those fields, just being able to be exposed to that.
It's good to know,
Yeah.
to know as a female how to change a flat tire, how to change the oil in your car. I mean, those were things that I learned probably at 12, 13. But it those are fundamentals to also being able to survive in today's world in the arts that you talk about. There's still not enough STEM. There's not enough around like you said, 2D, 3D, giving the kid a platform to be able to do what they love. And we'll be able to intertwine all of those other core things reading, math, writing, those types of things as well. But let me move quickly to and ask you about this question. What resources, in your opinion, do you feel that teachers need in order to really teach, and what students need in order to be successful? Now, we've talked about that piece, and we didn't call it mentor, but as a teacher, as a leader. But what resources do you feel that teachers need in order to be successful to teach?
Yeah, I think we need high quality professional development is huge. Uh, we spend a lot of time as teachers, as educators, planning, teaching, grading, and kind of just that cycle of those things. But we don't invest a lot of time or enough time in professional development because, like I was saying, before I became connected, everything that I did was at my school or within my district, and providing opportunities for staff to dig deeper, for teachers to dig deeper, whether it is gaining more knowledge in their content area or just practicing different things. I think is really important so that you can't get more of it, but we have to build in time for teachers to develop their craft, to learn from each other, to go visit each other in their classrooms. You have teachers that are exemplar teachers, and you want to get those teachers that are still growing or they might have some deficits, get them into that classroom so they can see what it looks like.
Right.
And if you can do that in real time, that's awesome. But us as administrators, we need to budget our time that we have with staff for professional
Hmm.
development to do that. I think for students as well, I think it's just you know processing time, um, exposure to different things. Uh, Again, I think one of the huge challenges is figuring out what students are passionate about, and when you find that and get them hooked, that's gonna drive further. And again, I
Right.
think it goes back to that relationship.
Yeah.
If you can figure out what a student needs and that they know that they can go to you and that you care about them, that's
Right.
gonna go a long way.
Right. Well, I think with COVID, it became painfully obvious that a lot of teachers who've been teaching for a long time and were not really up to speed with technology, that the remote learning was just such a steep learning curve for a lot of them. And I believe that they're definitely what you said. You've got to have the time and you got to have the funds in order to educate them. But also, the thing that became painfully obvious was a lot of our underserved areas and populations and those students were without some of the key tools, laptops. I'm so accustomed to my grandchildren having think pads for, they've had them for years. And then to find out that there are so many students around the country who were without computers, who were without access to even internet services. And so that's, I won't beat that horse to death, but I think that there's a way that we might be able to team up and to push forward with getting some of the funding and things that are needed, definitely needed in a lot of the schools. So let me ask you this. Um, what are your thoughts about year-round schools, smaller classrooms, every classroom having one teacher? Say that's probably some of the teachers are probably saying that's a teacher's dream, right?
Mhm.
But to have students, I think that they lose a lot when there is like a 3 month break in uh, learning versus I have a granddaughter who went from a public school that wasn't year round to up in SAC to a year round school, has become a 4.0 student, graduating with honors, has received, I can't even count how many invitations and scholarships to top Ivy League schools. But the difference was going from, a school that was only in session for 7 months, 8 months, versus a school that was in and going through that rotation. So what are your thoughts about year-round school? Somebody probably want to say, "Yikes, no year-round school," but I don't know if you've had that experience as an educator to work in a year-round school.
No, I haven't had the opportunity to work in a year-round school, but every district that I've been a part of has offered summer school to students, whether it's a mandatory summer school for credit recovery if there was some type of deficiency or something available for enrichment. And I think year-round school would be a really good thing to do, because I think those shorter breaks, in changing that transition is something that would be helpful to students to continue to stay engaged, continue. Again, I'll go back to it. We talk about that, the experience of Black and Brown students. Why would I want to go to a year-round school if I'm not in a place where I feel safe, where I feel loved, where I feel cared for? And so I think that's one really big component, is having a staff that's aware of who they are and really focusing. But there's value there. There's value there. I think there's different opportunities, and I think about what I try to do as an educator in the summer. I try to get my kids out. We try to experience our community. We live in the Bay Area, so I try to get them into the city. I try to get them into Oakland and just do different things, experience different things.
Mhm.
And I think that summer is a great opportunity to do that. But who's to say that we can't create those experiences in a year-round experience for all of our students? And
Right.
I think we
Yeah, well,
go
I
ahead.
was
I'm
going to
sorry.
say, I'm going to give you a little pushback as
Okay.
an OG as it relates to one of the things that I have found summer school has become is this opportunity for students who could have applied themselves. Yeah, I understand the situations, and I'm saying if all things were aligned, they're allowed to go to summer school to make up the deficiency in that, but also there are students who go to take extra classes, extra credit, and those kinds of things. With the year round school, all things being aligned, that they get 2 week breaks, incremental breaks. And most people who are on vacation, at best, if they're on vacation for 2 weeks, most of the time it's a week. But the thing is, they're able to properly plan. They know. I just see the difference when children are being educated. And again, that all being aligned, like you said, they like the school, they like the teachers, they have a lot of options, things of that nature. But just to, allow summer school, I know that they got to catch up, and that's the system as it is. But I come from that school of just because that's how it is doesn't mean that it can't be changed either.
Oh,
Because we really and truly have to look at these students who are failing, who are falling behind. So that was the
absolutely.
premise behind that question.
No, that's a great point. I think that we've got to be system disruptors if we're going to see all of our
Yeah.
students succeed. We got to do school differently. I think, as you mentioned, this COVID experience, this remote learning, has
Hmm.
exposed a lot of deficiencies that we have in systems, providing technology, providing Wi-Fi when you can't get good Wi-Fi in your
Yes.
community because it's too expensive. I mean, what are we doing there?
Right.
Because everyone should have access to Wi-Fi at this point.
Yeah.
Everyone should have access to a device, and if that's what we're asking students to learn on, then we need to be prepared to provide that
Hmm.
as a school site, and we've got to do things differently. I think we got kids that are thriving in remote learning, and this needs to be a new normal.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that was one of the things in terms of when we look at measuring academic success. There are some students, because we know bullying is still very much alive, and it's just as bad on social media as it has been in school. It's just on social media, it's words, but in school, a lot of it would be physical as well. So some of those students have and always will thrive, whereas others don't do as well. And I love what you just said, the new normal. That really and truly is what it's about, because now we realize that it can happen. It does happen. And so, what will that look like? So, you just kind of led into that question that I was going to ask you is, in your world, what does all of this look like now with having remote learning? Now the schools are starting to open back up some, but you've kind of got a 50-50 mix going on. Students are going to school maybe 3 days a week. So it's a whole different environment around that. And I don't know what your thoughts are, but I don't think that we will ever see schools where they will be thousands of students on, any given day in a particular at a particular school site.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we're going through that process right now as we prepare for next year to
Hmm.
determine, what's school going to look like. I just mentioned that we're we're probably going to have a remote school within the district.
Wow.
So I think that many districts are going to go to that because we're going to have members of the community that aren't comfortable with their students going back to school yet,
Hmm.
even even coming up in August, and also the ones that have seen their students thrive in remote learning because they're got the organizational skills, they've got the independence in
Yes.
order to get those things done. So I hope, moving forward, that continues to be an option for students. That is going to equal probably smaller class sizes potentially
Hmm.
for
Absolutely.
us. And with those smaller class sizes, that's more opportunity for students to get the one-on-one attention that they need, for teachers to scaffold to where they're able to build on skills that they're teaching and provide interventions if students aren't progressing the way that they should be, or at the rate that is expected at that age, that we build more time in to get them supports. Changing the curriculum a little bit is important too. I mean, I think that um, we touched on it a little bit at the beginning. The curriculum has a huge piece in that representation, and if students can see themselves in the curriculum,
Hmm.
hopefully we're moving more towards that versus getting one perspective in our content,
Hmm.
whether it's books that are written by a variety of different authors that are different races, genders, ethnicities. Hopefully, we are looking at those things, that we're being intentional about having schools that are anti-racist, that are supportive of those students that are exploring their gender, uh, students that are part of the LGBT community, students that are otherly abled, that we're addressing all those different things as we continue to push forward and kind of reimagine school, if you will.
Hmm. Okay. Uh, all of that, it will be interesting to see what the school year 2021-22 really and truly looks like. But I think you've touched on some really, really key things. We're going to pause for just a moment, but when we come back, Demetrius, I'm going to ask you, what is it that you would like viewers who are watching the show today to take away? So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching the You Didn't Get the Memo show with your inspirational host, Gloria Bailey Ray. It's your contributions that make this happen. To become a sponsor, send an email to youdidn'tgetthememo@gmail. That's the letter U, didn't get the memo. If you're not in a space to be a sponsor, but you like what you hear, we simply ask that you support what you like by making a contribution to the show. There are 3 ways to make an online donation. Visit paypal.me/Gloria Bailey Ray or Cash App or Venmo, Gloria Bailey Ray. Give what you can. Your support is appreciated.
All right. If you guys have been tuned in, I have been having a great discussion with educator Mr. Demetrius Ball. And although it's not your usual rah rah, and I'm excited, kind of, but I am excited because we were talking about, are our children being left behind? And one of the things that Demetrius has shared with us is the thoughts around teaching, schooling, remote learning. We have discussed a number of things, and still there's stuff to be determined. But before we went to break, one of the things that I asked Demetrius is, what do you want people watching this show to take away from today?
I think the biggest thing that viewers and listeners need to take away is that the importance of community. I think that gets lost so much in our society. We've got this capitalist economy. I'm a history guy, so I think about how our um, our country was founded, and basic settler colonialism, and the idea that there are groups that deserves things and others that don't, folks that are less than. But if we understand that we're all in this together, we may be in different spots, but if we start to develop that mindset where I have a role in your success and you have a role in my success, and we can all be successful, then that's going to take us a long way. And especially in education, if we start to devote the resources, we devote the time, not just to certain places, but if it takes a little bit of sacrifice of what we can have individually for the betterment of those around us, then it's going to lift us all up. So I just really want to emphasize that importance of community and being invested in education. Whether you have kids in schools or not, you're a member of a community, so
Yes.
you have a say in what the students in your community are learning. So take advantage of that, and be a positive contributor to that
Right.
community.
Right. Demetrius, I know that you do a podcast. So how can people follow you?
Right. So on social media, my handle on Twitter is at Demetrius_ball. You can find my show again. The AOS podcast is on Twitter. We have a YouTube page. Please check out the AOS podcast. It's myself, um, Doc Smith, David McGuire. We have a great time, and it is free PD for educators. We've been the AOS podcast since June, and we are making a transition to uh, the Engage podcast. We are going to focus moving forward. Our next episode is next Wednesday, the 17th, but our focus is on providing actionable professional development for school leaders. And we are really excited. If you know who Principal Kafele is, if you don't know who he is, look him up. He is a dynamic speaker, author, and he is going to grace us with, he's doing a current series on his YouTube channel about the assistant principal and preparing them to be school principals. So check us out, YouTube, Twitter. We would love to have you join our community. Even if you're not an educator, it's going to be a powerful experience.
Yeah, it is. Like I said before we went live, I had a chance to watch you guys, and I'm like, man, you guys, y'all can go. So it is definitely high energy and highly engaging. So Demetrius, don't go anywhere. But I want to thank my guest, Mr. Demetrius Ball, for being on the show today. Like I said, I highly encourage you guys to go to his page, to like, to follow him. Listen, I want to remind you that our regularly scheduled show for next week, next Tuesday, has been rescheduled for a special presentation on demystifying COVID-19 and available vaccines. Y'all, this is something you will not want to miss, but it's going to be on Saturday. So instead of Tuesday, mark your calendar for Saturday. That's March the 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. All right. So one of the best presentations you have ever seen as it relates to COVID. And it is so down to earth that even an 8-year-old, 7-year-old, 6-year-old will be able to understand it. So be sure and tune in. That's next Saturday, March the 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Listen, guys, remember to support our efforts by asking about our sponsorship opportunities or making a donation of any amount. Be sure and like and follow me on all of my social media platforms. And again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in to today's show. Until next week, next Saturday, the 20th, I want you to stay safe and remember that the quality of your life is determined by the decisions that you make. And if you didn't take anything away from today's interview, then it's you who didn't get the memo. Be well. Peace out, guys.